Hello and welcome to Forgotten Voices Media. We're here tonight. We're here tonight to talk about a time in our history known as the Balmoral Furniture Showroom bomb, and that was on the Shankill Road, and it was in the early 70s. And you know, whenever we look at the bomb, there's a huge, I guess, what happened in that bomb. It really took the hearts of a lot of people, and it took the hearts of a lot of people for reasons that you'll hear about as we go on and we talk about this very incident. So what I would like to actually start by doing is I would like to start by playing some video footage of that day, all those years ago, just to give you an outline of what it was that happened on that day. As you'll have seen the devastation and the destruction that happened on the Shankill Road all those years ago. And tonight we've got a man with us, a man called Axel Schmidt, and he's from the Northern Ireland Human Rights Watch, and he's here with authorization from a victim of that bomb. And you know, this victim, he would have touched the hearts of not just the people right across Northern Ireland, but he would have touched the hearts of people worldwide for the way in which this man was made a victim. So I'm just going to read from some testimony from this particular man, a man called Jackie Nichol. So bear with me. On Saturday, I had left our 17-month-old son, Colin, with my mother's neighbour, while I was playing football in Dunbury. She had taken Colin and her own child for a walk in the pram, and they ended up going down the Shankill Road. As they were passing the Balmoral Furniture showrooms, a bomb went off. 4 people were killed, 2 men and 2 children, and she was injured. The bomb went off at 12:25 p.m. After the match, we had heard of a bombing on the Shankill, and past word had gone off, but I didn't know Colin had been killed. Now, I think at this stage, what I would like to do before I bring Axel in, I would just like to show you a picture that many people will have seen, and again, this picture is the picture that would have touched many people's hearts on that day in the early 70s. So just bear with me for a moment. Take a look at this picture. There's Colin being carried from the rubble. You know, we talk about a war, we talk about a fight for freedom, we talk about the IRA, and they say that they were engaged in a war. They said that they had strategic targets. I wonder, can anyone say that, you know, that young child was a legitimate target. That young child was a strategic target. And, you know, when we look at the same IRA today, when we look at the Republican movement today, there's no remorse for events such as this. In fact, I go further and I'll say that what they do is they continue to traumatize and re-traumatize their victims. They continue to add insult to the injury of their victims. Now take a look at that image and let it sink in. I'm now going to read from something, and once I do this, I'm going to invite Axel on our screen to talk about it, to talk about the bomb, and to talk about the circumstances surrounding it, and to talk about, you know, what has happened since that day, and how that Jackie Nichol would not only have been made a victim by losing his young son, but how that it is that he was re-traumatized just a few short years ago. So I'm going to read from something from the press. And this is entitled Legacy Scandal. An IRA bomb killed my son, yet it was me who had to quit the victims forum, whilst a boastful bomber stayed as part of that victims forum. Jackie Nichol recounts how he liked and befriended a man on the victims forum until that he had found out he was an unrepentant IRA bomber. Mr. Nichol was left feeling dismayed and tricked. You know, it beggars belief. So I'd like for everyone to welcome Axel Schmidt to our screen. Welcome, Axel. If you would just like to tell people who you are, what it is that you do, and also the connection that you would have with the case in question. Over to you, Axel.
Thank you very much, John. Good evening, and good evening to all those who are listening to us tonight. I am Axel Schmidt, so I am the advocacy support manager for the advocacy service of the Ulster Human Rights Watch. And what do? We have created that advocacy service specifically to support victims of terrorism. Ulster Human Rights Watch is a bit larger than that, because we deal with different issues in relation to human rights, but we more specifically deal with a victim of terrorism through the advocacy service. So we have created that service to help victims of terrorism to look into the case, their historical cases that happened during the Troubles. So what we do is that we try to flush out as much information as we can in relation to these cases when people come to us with these cases. And then we try to push the cases as far as we can, and in order, if at all possible, to get some form of justice. And also what we do is that we assist the victims of terrorism to tell their own stories, either by way of writing or, and soon we'll be, I hope, able to do that, by way of audiovisual recordings as well. So that is the work we do, and we are entirely dedicated to supporting victims of terrorism, and to support them from also a human rights point of view. And the approach we have to human rights is a Judeo-Christian interpretation of human rights. Now, it has been the case that we often took human rights as being a tool or a means by which people could undermine the state, and more or less justify what they are doing in order basically to fulfill and achieve their political aims. We don't have at all that approach to human rights. We believe that we have the right approach to human rights, which is a tool to support citizens who are law-abiding citizens, and that's the approach we have taken, and that's how we try to fight as best as we can for innocent victims, genuine victims, and these victims can be either civilians, as the case you have just mentioned tonight, or they can be also member of the security forces, and we know that they paid a heavy price in their fight against terrorism in Northern Ireland. Many of them were killed and murdered, and sometimes in awful ways. And we tried, and today, even today, some of them have very serious mental consequences, suffer mental consequences by way of PTSD, for example. And we support them as well. And of course, some of them have been involved in cases that, in incidents that justify also investigation to be made. So that's basically what we do. That's where we stand for, and we really try to do our work as best as possible to promote what is right in society.
Axel, I mean, I'm just going to say something, and this is off the topic, but there seems to be like a shudder whenever you're talking, and this is the joy of whenever you're live streaming. Sometimes it works well, and sometimes it doesn't. So I don't know if there's any adjustment that you can make on your side. It seems to be, yeah, there's somebody else saying their connection is poor. Can the live chat just at this stage tell me if they hear me okay? Is it a one-way thing? If someone would like to pop up on the live chat there, whether you can hear me okay or not. I'm just waiting for someone to tell me. Yeah, if you would just like to do that for me, somebody on the live chat. I'm just waiting on someone from the live chat to tell us if. Oh yes, that's okay. So I'm good enough here. Yes, it seems to be you that's breaking up a wee bit, Axel. So I don't know if there's any adjustment that you can make. If not, we'll hobble on. So we will. We're here to do this.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. If I speak like this,
that's better.
Yeah?
That's better. Now we're through. Okay, so moving on, Axel, and okay, so. Look, whenever we talked last week, we identified this case of Jackie Nicholl and the Balmoral Furniture Showroom bombing. And you then proceeded, you had asked Jackie, could you then talk about this case on his behalf? And he's given you the authorization to do that. So would you just like to tell the people really what you know about the case from the ground upwards from the start? Over to you, Axel.
So what we know about this case is, in fact, we don't know much. We have tried to push as much as possible the authorities to produce information in relation to this case. What we got is the inquest file from the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, and also the HET report, that is the Historical Inquiries Team's report. So out of these two documents, and then question we put to the authorities, we have been able to get some information, but we of course run into frustration when we could not really push the case further. But at least we have information that allows us to say that for sure the IRA planted the bomb. And what we know is the details about how the bombing occurred and those who planted the bomb. So it was a car coming through the Shankill Road and stopped in front of the showroom. Two men got out of the car with a bomb, put the bomb on the steps of the showroom and ran out immediately, went back into the car, and the car pulled out. So that is how it happened. And one of the strange things in that case is that the IRA never acknowledged what they had done. So after committing this atrocity, because it was the most hurtful part of it, of course, are the two children who were killed and murdered on that occasion. You have, of course, Colin Nichol, but there is also Tracy Jane Munn, who was also killed at the same time. So this is something absolutely awful, which has had a terrible impact on Jackie Nichol, and we must remember his wife. Let us remember the price paid by women in that kind of cases, and the hurt it does cause to mothers who lose their children in such awful circumstances. So that is where we are at with the case. You have just shown the picture of this ambulance serviceman who was the leader of the ambulance service, who was carrying the baby. And this picture has, of course, shocked many. Now, let us remember that Anne, the mother of that child, was at the time in England. And she was with her sister, who had just lost her own son in a road accident in England. And she was there to support her. And she discovered on the news that very picture you have just shown there. And so not knowing, of course, that it was her own child. But that's how it happened. And the realization afterwards, as Jackie was moving on up the road, Shankill Road, and passing the showroom and realizing, and afterwards realizing that it was his own son who had been involved with that bombing. And then Anne on her own side being in England and seeing this picture on the news, and afterwards realizing that this was their own son. You know, these are terrible things which leave an impact. And although this happened on the 11th of December 1971, this pain and the consequences and the trauma is still being felt today by them. And I spoke on many occasions to Jackie, and I had the opportunity to speak a little bit with his wife as well. But the consequences are still felt today by both of them. And that is a long, long time ago. And we don't forget these kind of things. These, I would say, this kind of situation and this kind of incident leave a mark that you go to the grave with it. Okay, you don't get rid of it. You don't forget about it. You may be restored to some extent as far as the impact it has on yourself, but nevertheless, it's still there. The pain is still felt today, and I can tell you that from experience with them, having talked to them. So that's what we know about these cases. And of course, the inquest, when we look at the inquest file, it's, I mean, we cannot go into the details of that, but basically, the child died as a result of multiple injuries. You know, that is the magnitude of the atrocity that were carried out in Northern Ireland. And let us remember that is one of the 5 bombings that took place in the Shankill Road as well.
Yeah. Axel, what I would like you to do here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to play a couple of promotional videos here to do with other victims. And first and foremost, I'm going to let the people see the mindset of the type of person that would do that, because we'll have a little video footage here of a man who when asked by a reporter, would he plant a bomb in the Royal Victoria Hospital in the casualty, the accident and emergency? And he says, well, if that's what I was asked to do, I would do that. And whenever you think, Axel, that was a furniture showroom, for goodness sake, a furniture showroom. It wasn't a drinking club where there might have been, people that might have been involved in conflict or anything or it wasn't, it wasn't targeted at people that were, involved in fighting against the so-called Republican struggle or the Republican movement. Try to get that picture, people. That was a furniture showroom where, as Axel had said, that a car pulled up, they went in and they left a bomb, and it resulted in there you go. I'm going to focus on the children here. I'm going to focus on the children and say that it ended up in those children being murdered and killed. Axel, can I ask you, whilst I play these couple of videos, can I ask you to exit, right? Go back into the same link again and come back in again. Sometimes when we turn something off and turn it back on again, sound goes good. So if you do that, I'll play just a couple of promotional videos here for people. So if you do that whilst I do this.
For the past decade, the IRA has waged a classic guerrilla war that has included attacks on specific military targets. It has also included assassinations and random bombings that have alienated many Catholics because they have resulted in the deaths of innocent civilians. The British and Protestant majority see the IRA as terrorists.
If your kids grew up wanting to go out and shoot and bomb the Brits?
No, it wouldn't bother me. It wouldn't. It would bother me if they wanted to go and join the Brits. But if they'd ever tried it, I would break their legs.
Have you ever shot anybody?
Yes.
Who?
You can't say that. They're running about the day, they could turn around and get me.
Did you kill someone?
No, haven't went that far.
Would you like to?
I would.
Who?
Brits, peelers, UDA, UDR, Protestants if I have to. Would kill Protestants.
And it wouldn't matter what their lives are all about.
No. They're against the people, against the IRA. They shouldn't be here. Best place for them is on the ground.
If, when you were in the IRA, if you were told to go down and plant a bomb in the emergency room at the Queen Vic, at the hospital,
Yeah.
would you do it?
Yes. Would be done. I'd put a bomb on anywhere.
In the emergency room of the hospital?
Yes. If I was told to do it, I would do it.
Now, a bomb doesn't know the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant.
Yeah.
How do you accept that?
Civilians have to get injured. It can't be helped.
And again, that's Axel's back again. But before we bring Axel in, you just heard that, man. And that was the mindset that we'd plant a bomb in a furniture showroom, killing those children. And we're specifically not going to get into the injuries. The injuries, they're not fit for speaking on screen. And then when we take ourselves from 1971. This is 2021. And we listened to Mary Lou MacDonald, the leader of Sinn Féin, just last year, or I think it was the year before, but within the last few years. And let's just listen to Mary Lou MacDonald and remember that mindset. If that man had been asked to plant a bomb in a hospital, in an accident and an emergency, well, he would have done it. Not worrying who that bomb was going to kill. I mean, let's remember, the Royal Victoria Hospital was on the Falls Road, a predominantly nationalist, Catholic, Republican area. Bombs don't discriminate. Bombs don't choose what religion you are, what ideology that you follow. That's the nature of a bomb. I listened to Mary Lou McDonald.
Today, Irish Republicans commemorate the sacrifice and celebrate the lives of our hunger strikers. The 1981 hunger strike was a pivotal moment in Irish history, which saw Republican prisoners thwart British government efforts to criminalise the struggle for a united Ireland. And here in Ireland, Republicans remember with deep pride the sacrifice and the heroism of those who died in the H-blocks. Francis Hughes, Raymond McCreesh, Thomas McElwee. We will not allow them to be criminalised ever. 10 who took a stand, 10 who could not be broken, 10 lives cut short, 10 grieving families. Ten figures who will never be forgotten.
You'll see at the end of that, the Mary Lou McDonald speech just a few years ago, there was no mention of the 10 victims. And I posed the question there, Axel, and I think you're the best man maybe to answer this, but she said that the Republicans will not let these people be criminalised. And, from a human rights lawyer's point of view, is it ever acceptable, Axel, that these people would add insult to the injury of their victims in a calculated way? And where Mary Lou McDonald actually was standing on that day was Castlewellan. I'm going to tell you a short story here before you answer. But 5 mile away from a man's office, Chris Hazard's office, an MP's office, a Sinn Féin office, lives a man called Sammy Heenan. Sammy Heenan, you got to excuse me, I choke up whenever I go to talk about this, but Sammy Heenan was an 11-year-old child, and he was orphaned by the IRA from Castlewellan. He woke up one morning to the sound of loud bangs, and he looked out the window into the farmyard, and he says that the window was steamed up and he couldn't see through the window. You got to excuse me every time I think of this. So the young Sammy, 11 years of age, he ran down the stairs, he went out into the farmyard, and he found his father in a pool of blood. Now, what was really, what made this case even more notable was that Sammy had lost his mother a few short months before. He lived with his father, his grandmother, and his mother, and his grandmother not too far before that. And Sammy was left with his father, and young Sammy was orphaned at the hands of these people. Now, what makes this case, again, just like Jackie Nicol here, where there was a man called John Brewer who's involved with the George Mitchell Institute for Global Peace. And he said to me, John, there's 2 types of victims. There is those that want to forget, and there's those that can't forget. And I remember him saying that, and I thought, well, that's not the type of victims that I talk to regularly. That's not the type of victims, because there are also those victims who want to forget, but are not being permitted to forget because of the agitations of the Republican movement, because of the glorification of the terrorism that they were involved in, because of what you just seen there, where we will not let these people be criminalised. Now, she mentioned Francis Hughes. She mentioned Raymond McCreish. And those people were serial killers. Raymond McCreish was caught with a rifle that was used to shoot Protestant workmen, where they took them, innocent men, they took them from a bus and they lined them up and they literally, they shot every one of them. They killed them stone dead, and they were all innocent men. And yet the Republican movement thought that it was fit, they seen it fit, to name a children's play park after Raymond McCreish. And in Castlewellan, Chris Hazard's office is named the McGorian and McNulty office, or the advice centre. You know, you couldn't really make this up. And you see, when you think about Sammy Heenan, which you talked about there, Sammy Heenan says that whenever he thinks about an MP's office, this wouldn't happen anywhere else, Western worldwide. When he thinks about an MP's office, where they have an obligation to service, to work on behalf of the entire community, they have an onus or responsibility to ensure that that office is approachable by anyone. You tell me that that office is open and inviting to Sammy Heenan, not just Sammy Heenan, but many other IRA victims in that area. Axel, is it ever right under such circumstances that you know, does everybody have rights? Does a victim have rights? Over to you, Axel.
Thank you. Well, the position and our position, generally speaking, should be very clear. There is no place whatsoever in a democratic society for glorification of terrorism. And therefore, anybody who speaks like Mary McDonnell, or who even want to call a playground along the name of a terrorist, these things should not even be tolerated in a democratic society. And therefore, there is no right for Mary McDougall to speak, I don't know, whatever she is, to speak like this. There is no right whatsoever to express herself the way she does. In fact, she should be censored, and nothing should be done in society to glorify terrorism, to support terrorism, to promote terrorism, and all these things should be banned. So we need to take a very, very clear stand on that. And the basis of human rights precisely was to oppose fascism. And terrorism is a form of fascism. And the whole concept of human rights created after the Second World War was precisely to prevent any form of fascism to come back to the fore, and to direct people, and to govern people, and to impose on people the things which are absolutely abhorrent and cannot be tolerated, and in particular should not affect the right to life of people. And obviously, a terrorist, what does he do? He destroys the very fundamental right, which is the right to life. And after that, of course, if you destroy that right, well, all the rest goes with it. So that's where we stand, and that's what we need to promote, what is right in society. And anything that involves violence, murder, all these things should be opposed and condemned and fought against.
Axel, what I would like to now do is I would like to play another victim's story, and I'm choosing this victim's clip for a specific reason. Is that I know that there's people. In fact, I just had a text message there from someone from the Catholic end of the community, who had said to me just there now that the lady finds it very, very hard to watch the story there of Jackie Nichol and what it was that happened to him. And and I want to play this one particularly because this is a man he came from Southern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, and let's hear David's story. Let's hear David Kelly talk about losing his father, Patrick Kelly, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about that. And then what I want to do, Axel, is I want to scratch the surface with yourself because you're the man to answer these questions. But, what is it that we as people can do? What is it that victims can do in order to appeal to people in power and authority within the law enforcement, within, the government, the system of governance? That is there any way that these people can be toned down? Is there any way that the laws that are there, that the laws that are existing could be used in a way that adding insult to the injury of victims? Well, it should never be tolerated in any what passes as a normal society. So let's listen to David and then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. You're a victim, a real life victim. You probably are traumatized and re-traumatized by some of the actions of these people even today and their lack of remorse, I guess, for what had happened. I mean, David, what exactly are you fighting for? Is it truth? Is it justice?
Well, I guess I would have, see, as a reaction to what happened to us, me and my family, my mother and my younger brothers, we all moved to London. So we were sort of out of the picture in our formative years. But I returned as a young man and I looked around and said, who killed my father, and how is my father being remembered, or is he just going to be forgotten completely, a footnote in the history books? And then as I made more and more inquiries into what happened to my father, I said someone should be held to account, and I was thinking along the lines of, yes, someone in a court of law being found guilty. So, that's where I would have been coming from. In more recent years, like it's 37 years this year since it happened, I'm not so much interested in someone serving a prison sentence, to be honest, at this stage, but it's more just to have someone held accountable in some form, whether it's in a criminal or civil court, or there's a public inquiry. I know there's other methods like coroner's court and so forth. It's just to have someone held to account, so it should be remembered in the history books of what actually happened on that day, and there could be no muddying of the waters. I mean, for years, what I call the Provisional Republican Movement, which includes Sinn Féin, would have spread the malicious rumours that my father was actually killed in a friendly fire incident, and it was all covered up by the authorities. So that's a constant lie I've had to deal with for years. So that's where it's just getting that truth out there. I reckon the sacrifice my father made, so that we don't have we don't get to a point where you have elected TDs walking around Dáil Éireann actually saying that the Provisional IRA armed struggle was legitimate and nobody actually countering them. I'm here to say, hold on, what about my father and the young Garda and the others who were killed, the other members of the Irish security forces and civilians? Their lives mattered, and you'd be spitting on their graves if you don't stand up and speak on their behalf when these people make their ludicrous claims. The Army, in collaboration with the Council, put up a lovely memorial plaque for my father, a memorial stone, I should say, and it's lovely, but only a short distance away is a memorial to an IRA hunger striker, Kieran Hertzson. So every time I stand and admire my father's stone, but then only a matter of yards away is a memorial stone to a man from the organisation that murdered my father. So I'm reminded every time I see that. I'm also reminded, last year I had the president of Sinn Féin. She said the legitimate armed struggle was justified, and that if she had been a bit older and had lived in Northern Ireland, she would have joined up as a volunteer. And for me to hear a leading Irish politician say that was re-traumatizing for me.
So as you'll have heard David's story, and I'm just going to draw people's attention to a few words that he says that really should we be in a position whereby that we have elected members of Dáil Éireann in Southern Ireland walk around Dáil Éireann saying that what happened here in Northern Ireland, what happened to Jackie Nicholls' son Colin, what happened to David's father, what happened to other victims, where they're justifying the taking of innocent life. I mean, it really, really beggars belief. And on that subject, I'm just going to take opportunity before I move on to you, Axel, to talk to the live chat and to tell the live chat that we'll be finishing here at the top of the hour, roughly 9 o'clock. And Axel will come back in the very, very near future to talk about various subjects that we've already discussed some of those subjects, and Axel's the man to talk about, or to talk to about some of these things. And whenever we finish here, what we'll be doing is that we'll be going over to Restore UK, and what David had mentioned there, that, is it right that these people would be justifying the murder of innocent people all these years later, which actually, as you see, it has clearly traumatized David, and when David has no justice for his father, Patrick. And that's just one victim, but there are many, many victims that are not being permitted to forget as a result of these people continuing to glorify terrorism, continuing to justify the terrorism, continuing to justify things in a way that they totally disregard the innocent life that was lost in the things that was done in the past. So we're going to Restore UK, and we'll be there not long after we finish here. So I'd like for everyone to go over, because we have some breaking news, and I think everybody should hear it. Everyone should hear it, and we'll talk about that on Restore. So Axel, whenever you look at David there, and whenever you listen to that about he's totally traumatized as a result of elected members to Dáil Éireann, TDs, who are justifying the murder of his, they're justifying, they says it was legitimate what these people done. Should that ever be permitted in a society? And from a human rights point of view, what is it that we can do about that in order to stop this unacceptable behavior from happening, Axel?
Well, first of all, what we must be very clear about is that terrorism is never, ever justified. And if you look back even at the history of the troubles in Northern Ireland, if you take, for example, the civil rights movement, or people saying that their rights had been violated, well, they had every opportunity, even at that time, to take any kind of case to court, and even to go before the European Court of Human Rights. There is not even one case that has ever been brought to the European Court of Human Rights in relation to any kind of violation related to civil rights and the civil rights movement. On the contrary, what do we have? We have at least 12 cases which were brought by terrorists or their families before the European Court of Human Rights, targeting the United Kingdom, and which were successful against the UK. But these were brought by terrorists to undermine precisely the state they were fighting against. So, first of all, it is never, ever justified. Now, the big problem we have and we are facing in relation to human rights is that the approach which was taken after the Second World War was mainly a vertical approach. In other words, the emphasis and the concern of the authorities was to protect the citizens against the state, because precisely what had happened in Germany, the state took over and destroyed the human rights of all the people, and we know the story about Nazism and the impact it had, not only in Germany, but of course across Europe. And who was successful in defeating Nazism? It was the United Kingdom. Who was the first country who subscribed to the European Convention of Human Rights? It was the United Kingdom. Why is that? Because the human rights have always been protected in the United Kingdom. Now, because we have this vertical approach to human rights, it has been used and abused by terrorists to undermine the state and to attack the state, because the authorities, of course, and security forces keep records of what they do. So it's always easier to fight a case against the state because we have access to the records. Now, we are on the other side of things when we fight against terrorism, because precisely terrorists don't keep records, destroy evidence, keep quiet, say nothing, all these things, and they have a strategy, of course, to prevent evidence to come out. So that's why it's far more difficult for us to fight against terrorism. But what we need to do is to ask the authorities and to fight for the authorities to take a stand against terrorism and to develop the horizontal approach to human rights. In other words, me and you and all those who listen to us and have no involvement whatsoever in terrorism have the right to be protected by the authorities against terrorists. And that's what we need to do, to strengthen the hand of security forces and the state to protect us against the danger and the risk we face from terrorists. That's what needs to be done. And that is precisely human rights being enforced. We have the right to live, and we have the right to not to be threatened, and not to worry about going out and finding ourselves being blown up by a bomb or shot at. So that is the kind of things we need to do, and that's what we are really pushing the authorities to do and to take a stand for. Now, this approach needs to be taken not only in the UK but also throughout Europe, and that is being done as well. And clearly, the stand taken by the European Union is terrorism is never justified. And what we need to do now is for the authorities to develop their approach to terrorism in order to destroy terrorism and to protect us.
And just on the back of that again, and this is again for the live chat so that we all understand, but again, if I were a victim, and if the victim makers who made me a victim, if they were traumatizing me with the glorification of terrorism, with the things that they were doing, I mean, is there a case along those lines, if it could be proven that they were actually glorifying the terrorism that made me a victim, Axel?
Yes, well, in relation to freedom of expression, you see, we all have the freedom of expression. I have the right to speak to you now. You see, you have the right to listen to me or not to listen to me. That's also your right, okay? So we have the right to exchange ideas and to express ourselves. But I have no right whatsoever, even today, in what I'm speaking, as I am speaking to you, to glorify terrorism, to glorify murder, or to do these kind of things. And therefore, when we have this kind of evidence of people using that kind of word and encouraging basically others to do what is obviously against the law, at that point, yes, there is a case, I believe, against them.
I mean, that's very interesting, and you're a good man. I mean, you're a good string to the bow of coming on here, because often the questions that we need answered in our own minds, it takes someone like you, Axel, to come along and to answer those questions for us. So for that reason, I mean, I thank you, and I'm sure that the people on the stream here would also thank you for coming along. And Axel, would you just like then to, we're coming to the top of the hour with about 7 minutes to go. So would you like to just tell people about your group, about what it is that you do within your group? And I know that at the minute that you're working to help people, victims of terrorism, to get pensions for the terrorism that was visited upon them. So would you like to tell us a bit about that, please?
Yes, that's a good point. You see, the victims of the victim payment scheme, as it is conceived, it has been put together and as it is implemented, that is a very interesting case because, as you know, we have a big problem in Northern Ireland as a result of having a wrong interpretation of who a victim is. And therefore, the victim can be the innocent victim we have spoken about today, like Colleen Nichol, a child, and also, according to that interpretation, it can be the terrorist, the perpetrator of act of terrorism. So as a result of that, if we had been in that logic, well, the victim payment scheme would have been open to terrorists as well as to innocent victims. Very interestingly, and we have made representation with the NIO to get there. Very interestingly, the terrorists have been excluded and are excluded from that scheme. And we are going to hold on to that and to make sure that in the future that will be the case as well. But in law today, they are excluded, and that is a very positive outcome. Is probably one of the rare positive outcome we have in relation to dealing with victims of terrorism since the Belfast Agreement. So that's what we do. We try to, first of all, to have the law set on the right footing, and then of course we'll help the victims, the genuine victims, to get to the point where they may be entitled to receive anything from the victim payment scheme. But let us remember that is not, that is not going to be easy for the following reason. Is that first of all, we need to have an incident which is related to the trouble, but secondly, mainly, we need to have a serious injury. And because of that, I don't want to raise false hopes in relation to for all those who listen to us tonight. But because of that, you see, you need to prove that you are seriously injured today, not only that you were 30 years ago, but today, by way, for example, of PTSD or serious physical injury. And as a result of that, well, the door may be open for you to have access to this victim payment scheme. Now, that doesn't prevent you from applying for it, but it doesn't mean that you're going to get it. Okay, so I want to be absolutely clear about that. I don't want to raise any false hopes in relation to that. What I'm saying is that as far as the law is concerned, we believe that the law is sound, and all those who would then be entitled to receive that payment, well, obviously, the decision will not be made by ourselves, but by the Victim Payments Board, and that will come to pass in due course. And we don't know, by the way, all the details in relation to the application process, even at this stage. So Axel, that's what we do. So we have,
Sorry, go ahead. I thought you were finished. Go ahead, over to you.
So yes, so that's what we do in relation to the victim payment scheme, but mainly we concentrate on incident. Okay, so for that, the victim payment scheme will be working also with other organizations who will assist us in filling in the forms and making the applications. But mainly what we deal with are the incidents and the troubles, and we try to really get as much information as we can in relation to these cases in order to push the authorities to acknowledge, and that's acknowledgement is very important even in the case of the man you just put, David Kelly, I think you were talking about earlier on. So we need to have this acknowledgement by the authorities of what has happened, and we fight for that. If of course we can push cases further, we'll do that in order to get some form of justice for innocent victims who were involved in that kind of incident. And then the other important thing we are developing is really the possibility for people, for victims, genuine victims, to tell their stories and to have their stories made public by way of the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland. So we have created the Legacy of the Past record, and we are actively moving forward with that project. And that will be also an opportunity for victims to make known their stories, not only in Northern Ireland, but publicly, the public at large, even throughout the world.
I'm sorry, what was it again that what was it you called your would you tell people?
It's called the Legacy of the Past Record, and we have created that it's a form of archive with the Public Record Office of Northern Ireland, okay? And through them, that will be made available to the public.
Yeah, and the name of the advocacy service that you have, is it the Ulster Human Rights Watch? Yeah.
That's right. It's the Ulster Human Rights Watch Advocacy Service, and we are based in Lurgan. You can type it on your computer, Ulster Human Rights Watch, and you will get access to our website. We are also on Facebook, on Twitter. So that's how you can get in contact with us. So don't hesitate to call us or to send us an email or to get in touch by way of Facebook or Twitter or respond to the website. Everything is there provided for you, okay?
And Axel, I mean, I thank you again for coming on, and you know, I'm just hoping that you'll come on regularly for us, because we will have a lot of questions as time goes on, as we do more and more of these streams. You know, whenever you think that you've seen it all, then you realise that you haven't even scratched the depths of where things actually go, and you keep coming up with these new questions. And a man like you would be very, very good to be on hand to be able to answer these questions for us. So again, people, just let's recap again why that it was that we came and what it was that we were highlighting tonight. We were highlighting the case of Jackie Nicholl and his son Colin Nicholl. And, you know, there were other people that was involved in what was known as the Balmoral Furniture Showroom bombing, and that was in 1971. And again, I'm going to say this, but, you know, for goodness sake, it was a furniture shop. I mean, that wasn't a legitimate target. That wasn't, you know, freeing Ireland. That wasn't fighting a war, you know, killing innocent people. A furniture shop now, a furniture shop. Just think about that. Just try to drink that in. And yet that war was justified according to the current leader of Sinn Féin. Axel, thank you very much for coming along. I really, really appreciate it. And as I say, I hope that we can have you back regularly on our stream.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you. And I'm going to play us out with another victim story, and then we'll close the screen. So thanks very much, Axel.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
I'm just looking for a victim story. Here we go.
And you think, did my dad suffer? Was he suffering all that way? Did he suffer for God knows how many hours? Was he lying there, you know? And that's traumatizing as well, to think that what your loved one was just, you know, lying there in agony or whatever. And it wasn't until I got the original inquest through Seth, and in that, the doctor that arrives on the scene describes the scene, and he put to rest that rumour that my dad survived, because he didn't. He instantly died. His injuries caused him to be dead. The doctor runs straight past him because he's dead. Bob is no longer going to be alive much longer. He realises that, so he's doing triage, and he describes a scene, and the next he describes someone in the field, and Pete describes him, and he describes how he goes to them to treat them. There's a nurse with Bob, there's someone comforting dad. And that was just such a nice thing to know, that people were comforting him, even though he passed. The community of Enniskillen are very spiritual, so I can imagine one of them might have said a prayer. It just gives you that touch of comfort that I know what happened. And then you can close that page. There it is, it's answered. He died quickly, he didn't suffer, he didn't, you know, which is, in a funny way, it was a relief, because as soon as I heard that one of them might have survived, it was such a relief to be able to let that go. And now the other things, if police could just give me the ability to let things go, then and put them away and correct that, then my mental health will be much better. Because at the minute, I still get drawn back to that. It's still in the back of the mind.
So there you go, people. That's the end of the show. And I mean, I'm going to close here, and within the next sort of 5 minutes or so, I'll be over in Restore UK, and we'll be there to talk about the current situation in our country today. And as you heard it there, with reference to these, the Republican movement specifically, I mean, for the rights and wrongs of what has happened in this country. And we know that there were problems coming from both sides of the so-called divide here in Northern Ireland. But I don't see anyone else that traumatizes and re-traumatizes their victims, just like these people do. And as you heard Mary Lou McDonald, you heard David Kelly, whose father's Paddy was killed. When let me tell you about David's story just quickly. David's father, Paddy, he was an Irish army, a legitimate Irish army member, and he was going out to save a man that had been kidnapped, a man called Don Tidy, an Irish business person, an Irish citizen. And the IRA shot David Kelly's dad and a young guard whilst they were looking for this kidnapped businessman. And, you hear, David, that he hasn't had any justice. And the Republican movement, whilst Mary Lou McDonald is part of Dáil Éireann, and she's a TD, and yet she says that this was justified. It was justified that David lost his life. An innocent man going out to do a job, a member of the Irish security forces, a member of the Irish Army. And the IRA, they thought that they were free in Ireland, one Irish army officer at a time, one guard at a time. And these people have no shame. They have absolutely no shame. And the more and more that I tell these stories, the more that I tell the victims' stories, the more that we begin to realize that there will never be peace in this country. There will never be reconciliation between people until these parasites, these bloodsuckers, get off the backs, not just of our people. And specifically, I make no apology for saying that I'm a British unionist living here in Northern Ireland. I've nothing against ordinary Catholics or ordinary nationalist people. Even if they subscribe to wanting a united Ireland, well, that's their right to do so. The same way that it's my right to be a British unionist. I was born here, and by birthright, I was born here. But what gives the Republican movement the right to traumatize people, the right to hold this country to ransom? And believe me, that's exactly what they are doing. And even further, to add insult to the injury, they are being placated by our own government. They are being placated by the Irish government. They are being facilitated, we have learned in the last week, by the PSNI, by the PSNI hierarchy, by the management team within the PSNI. And this is why this country has erupted in the last week or two, because people are seeing one law for one set and another law for other people. So listen, thank you very much for coming along, and I hope that you enjoyed Axel's chat. And we will have Axel back in the very, very near future. We've talked about a lot of subjects, and we'll be coming back in order to scratch the surface and to have some expert opinion and advice on a lot of subjects. So thanks very much for joining us. And again, I'm going to play us out with one more victim story, and then I'll see you all over at Restore UK within, say, the next 5 minutes. So again, we'll get an appropriate victim here. And here we go. Listen to a man, Neil Tattersall, who was an innocent victim of a bomb in Manchester. Neil hadn't done anyone any harm ever, and yet he found himself a victim of IRA terrorism. Unrepentant, unapologetic IRA terrorism, I may add. See you soon.
As I say, we didn't think for 1 minute that anything was going to happen. We thought we were going to get a free day off work, and then, as I say, I was sat on the wall, and I jumped down off the wall, and as I turned around, that's when the bomb went off, and I actually thought the bomb was in the building, and I later found out that the bomb was behind the wall that I was sat on. So how I got off that, before it went off, I don't know. And then just pandemonium. The building just came crashing down on top of us. And instinctively, the thing to do was to cover your head. But then, obviously, I felt an almighty thud in the bottom of my back. It's like somebody had really punched me hard in the bottom of my back. And I just saw people running, so I thought, well, that's what I've got to do. I managed to get up onto my feet, but I couldn't get even 2 steps away. And I just froze and I couldn't move. Two people came on either side of me and started dragging me off. And then the police took over, and I was outside Lloyd's Bank, but they couldn't move me any further than that. And then one of the police officers actually took whatever was in my back out my back. And then a bomb disposal guy came down, and he said that there was a bomb inside Lloyd's Bank and that they'd move away from the scene. So the police responded, we're not leaving because, we're not leaving him. And his response was, well, leave him because he's dying anyway, And obviously hearing that wasn't a very good thing, They couldn't get an ambulance into me because the place was all sealed off. And eventually one of the police officers went off and brought an ambulance in with the crew. He said that they would come in and get me. And then obviously I was rushed into Manchester Royal Infirmary.